Margaret Wilson gazed out the window of the accounting firm in Dallas's financial district, looking at the vast blue sky that was so characteristic of Texas. Her life was completely different from what it had been 2 years ago. Since her divorce was finalized, Margaret had finally begun to feel true peace for the first time. "Have a good day," her colleague Sarah called out. "Looks like you can leave early today." "Yes, I have dinner plans with James and my son," Margaret replied with a smile. Meeting James Miller had been by chance. She'd met him a year ago at a friend's birthday party, and he ran a small Italian restaurant in the Dallas suburbs. He was the complete opposite of her ex-husband Robert. James was gentle, listened to what Margaret had to say, and respected her opinions. Most importantly, he truly cared for her 13-year-old son Ryan as if he were his own. When Margaret returned to her apartment, Ryan had finished his homework and was playing video games on the sofa. He had brown eyes like his mother and the dark hair he'd inherited from his father. "Welcome home, Mom," Ryan said, turning around. James called. "He said he'll pick us up at 7. "Thanks. Did you finish your homework?" "Yep, both math and English are all done." Margaret ruffled her son's hair. After the divorce, Ryan had been confused at first, but now he had adapted to their new life. He still saw his father Robert twice a month, but recently those visits had become less frequent. The reason given was that Robert's company had gotten busier, but Margaret could sense that Ryan was relieved. When James came to pick them up, the three of them headed to his restaurant. Despite being a weeknight, the place was bustling with regular customers. James went into the kitchen himself and prepared his special pasta for them. "Margaret, you haven't been looking well lately. Are you okay?" James asked with concern. "Actually, I've been suffering from terrible headaches for the past few weeks," Margaret said, placing her hand on her forehead. "Especially sharp, throbbing pain on the right side. Have you been to the doctor?" "Not yet. I've been managing with over-the-counter pain medication. Work has been so busy." Ryan looked up at his mother with worry. "Mom, I've been concerned too. Sometimes you suddenly get this pained expression on your face." Margaret was surprised by her son's perceptiveness. Indeed, the headaches were getting more severe by the day. At first, she thought they were caused by fatigue or stress, but even with sufficient rest, they didn't improve. The pain typically started around her right back teeth and then spread throughout her entire head. "Why don't you see a specialist tomorrow?" James suggested. "I know a neurologist I could refer you to." Margaret hesitated. During the divorce proceedings, expenses had piled up with lawyer fees and preparing for a new place to live, and she'd gotten into the habit of cutting back on medical costs. However, seeing the worried expressions on James's and Ryan's faces, she nodded. "You're right. I'll try to make an appointment for this Saturday." 2 years ago, Margaret and Robert's marriage had fallen apart. Robert, who ran an IT company, was successful but gradually became controlling and began monitoring Margaret's every move. Robert even resented her meeting with friends and constantly regarded her with suspicion. The divorce proceedings went on for a long time, but ultimately Margaret gained custody of her son and received a substantial amount in alimony. Their current life wasn't luxurious by any means, but Margaret was truly satisfied. James gave her freedom, and Ryan was growing up healthy in their new environment. The only worry was these headaches. That night, lying in bed, Margaret resolved to make a doctor's appointment the next day. It was probably just migraines or stress from work. Telling herself this, she fell asleep. The following Tuesday, Margaret was working on quarterly financial reports at the office. While staring at the rows of numbers, she tried to concentrate, but she felt the dull pain starting from her right temple gradually intensifying. Around 2 in the afternoon, the pain suddenly hit her in intense waves. It felt like thunder was roaring inside her head, such excruciating pain that Margaret instinctively placed both hands on her desk. "Margaret, are you okay?" Sarah from the next desk jumped up in alarm. "It's just my head," Margaret answered with a pale face. The pain was more intense than anything she'd ever experienced, and she was even feeling nauseous. Sarah quickly brought her cold water. "You look completely white. Maybe you should go home early today." Margaret nodded. She took a strong headache medicine she'd bought at the pharmacy, but the relief was only temporary. Lately, she'd had to take medication several times a day. That evening, while having dinner with Ryan at James's restaurant, the severe pain struck again. Margaret involuntarily dropped her fork and clutched her head. "Mom!" Ryan rushed over with concern. James immediately brought a chair and helped Margaret sit down. "This isn't a normal headache. We absolutely have to go to the hospital tomorrow." "But work." "Work doesn't matter." James's voice carried an unusual sternness. "Your health is far more important." Ryan held his mother's hand and said, "Mom, I'm worried too. You've been making groaning sounds at night lately." Margaret was shocked by her son's words. She hadn't realized it herself, but the pain had been continuing even during sleep. The next day, Margaret called the office to take a half-day off and visited the neurologist James had recommended. The neurology department at Dallas General Hospital was characterized by white walls and the smell of disinfectant. "Mrs. Wilson, when did the pain begin?" Dr. Patel asked in a gentle tone. "About 3 weeks ago. At first it was mild pain, but it's been getting more severe each day." "Can you pinpoint where the pain is located?" Margaret pointed to the area around her right back teeth. "It starts here and spreads throughout my head. The right side is particularly severe." After conducting a detailed interview, Dr. Patel performed basic neurological tests. The reflex tests and visual field examinations didn't reveal any particular abnormalities. "Given the severity and duration of your symptoms, I recommend an MRI scan," the doctor explained with a serious expression. "We need to check for brain tumors or vascular abnormalities." "Brain tumor." Margaret's voice trembled. "It's just one possibility we need to investigate. You don't need to worry too much. But with such severe headaches continuing, we should properly determine the cause." The MRI appointment was scheduled for a week later. Margaret had to continue her daily life while harboring anxiety. That weekend, Ryan laid his head on Margaret's lap and said, "Mom, I hope they don't find anything in the test." "I'm sure it'll be fine," Margaret answered, stroking her son's hair. However, deep in her heart, anxiety was growing. James made time between work to talk with Margaret. "My grandmother suffered from similar headaches once. It turned out to be caused by tension in her neck muscles." "Really?" "Yes. Stress and poor posture can apparently have an impact too. In your case, the divorce proceedings and adapting to a new life might have unknowingly put stress on your body." Margaret felt somewhat reassured by James's words. Indeed, the past 2 years had been filled with major life changes. During the divorce proceedings, she'd had to contact lawyers almost daily, search for new housing, and handle her son's school transfer procedures. However, the pain worsened day by day. Even strong over-the-counter pain medications had limited effectiveness, and it became difficult to concentrate at work. At night, she woke up multiple times due to the pain, and by morning she was already exhausted. The day before the MRI, Ryan asked to accompany her. "Can I come to the hospital with you tomorrow?" he asked worriedly. "Don't you have school?" "But I'm worried about you going alone." Margaret's heart warmed at her son's kindness. "I'll be fine. I'll contact you right after the test." James also adjusted his work schedule and offered to pick her up after the test. "Whatever the results are, you're not alone. We're here for you." That night, lying in bed, Margaret reflected on how much her life had changed since these headaches began. The pain had reduced her work efficiency, and she was causing worry for her son and James. Most of all, she felt like the peaceful life she'd finally achieved was being threatened. However, she felt deep gratitude for the support from James and Ryan. If it had been Robert, he probably would have blamed her even for being sick. Her current family strengthened their bonds, especially during difficult times. If tomorrow's test revealed the cause, they would surely find a treatment method too. Margaret told herself this as she fell asleep, fighting the pain. On the morning of the test, Margaret woke up early. Feeling the dull pain in her right temple, she gazed out the window. The Texas sky was cloudless blue as always, but her heart felt heavy. "Mom, I made breakfast," Ryan called from the kitchen. When Margaret went to the dining room, her son had prepared her favorite French toast. Seeing a 13-year-old boy cooking to care for his mother made her heart swell with emotion. "Thank you, Ryan," Margaret said, sitting down while stroking her son's head. "Are you scared about the test?" Ryan asked worriedly. "A little. But once we know the cause, we can treat it," Margaret answered with a smile. In reality, thinking about the possibility of a brain tumor made her extremely anxious. At 10 in the morning, Margaret arrived at the radiology department of Dallas General Hospital. After completing the paperwork at reception, she was instructed to change into examination clothes. She removed all metal accessories and put on the hospital's thin examination gown. "Mrs. Wilson, we're ready for you," Linda the technician appeared. She was a woman in her mid-40s with a gentle smile. "Is this your first MRI?" "Yes," Margaret nodded. "It will make loud noises, but it's important not to move. We'll be watching you constantly during the examination, so please don't worry." Entering the MRI room, Margaret was confronted by a large white machine. The cylindrical device was bigger than she'd expected, and she felt slightly intimidated. Margaret lay down on the examination table following instructions. "We'll secure your head with this cushion so you don't move it," the technician explained carefully while immobilizing Margaret's head. "If you feel anything unusual, press this button." When the examination began, the machine started making loud noises as expected. Deep bass sounds and high-pitched whines alternated. Margaret closed her eyes and waited for time to pass while thinking about James and Ryan. The first 30 minutes proceeded smoothly. Margaret endured the pain while staying perfectly still. The technician's voice occasionally came through the intercom, encouraging her with 10 more minutes and everything is going smoothly. However, about 40 minutes into the examination, the machine noise suddenly stopped. Margaret opened her eyes but couldn't understand what was happening. After a few minutes, she could hear commotion from the next room. Multiple voices talking and the sound of typing on keyboards echoed. Margaret's anxiety gradually increased. "Excuse me, we're calling Dr. Patel," the technician said. "Please wait a little longer." Margaret remained immobilized on the examination table, feeling time pass. The headache was also gradually intensifying, and being restrained was becoming painful. 15 minutes later, Dr. Patel entered the MRI room with the technician. His expression was more serious than usual, and Margaret's heart began beating rapidly. "Mrs. Wilson, I apologize. This is taking longer than expected," the doctor seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "We'd like to take images from a different angle once more." "Is there a problem?" Margaret's voice trembled. "I'll explain the details after the examination is complete. For now, please focus on the test." The additional examination began. This time they would use contrast dye, so she received an intravenous injection in her arm. Feeling the cold liquid spread through her blood vessels and body, Margaret imagined the worst-case scenario. 20 minutes after the examination resumed, she could hear the doctor talking with the technician again in an agitated manner. "What exactly is this supposed to mean?" Dr. Patel's voice could be heard. Margaret became anxious and involuntarily gasped. The doctor's confused voice clearly indicated an abnormal situation. Mrs. Wilson, we're temporarily suspending the examination. The technician hurried into the examination room. You need to speak with the doctor. When Margaret got down from the examination table, her legs wobbled. She was exhausted from the long examination and anxiety. Please come this way. Dr. Patel guided her to another room. The room had a large monitor displaying MRI images of her brain. Mrs. Wilson, please look at this image, the doctor pointed at the screen. Looking at what was displayed on the screen, Margaret was speechless. Near her right back teeth, there was clearly a small object that definitely shouldn't be inside a human body. It was round in shape and appeared to be made of metal. What is this? Margaret asked in a trembling voice. It's not a medical implant or filling material, the doctor had a perplexed expression. Judging from its shape, it looks like some kind of electronic device. Margaret's mind was in chaos. How could electronic equipment be inside her head? When did you have any surgeries? Including dental work. Dental work. Margaret searched her memory. I had my wisdom teeth removed 3 years ago. Which dental office was that? It was a dental office belonging to a friend of Robert, my ex-husband. A Dr. Harris. The doctor's expression became even more serious. This object was clearly not implanted for medical purposes. From its shape and location, it's highly likely to be some kind of electronic device. Margaret began trembling uncontrollably. The dental work 3 years ago, that was around the time the divorce proceedings had begun. Robert had strongly recommended his friend's dentist and had handled all the insurance procedures himself. We need to contact the police, the doctor said quietly. This is clearly illegal medical practice. Margaret slumped back in her chair. The cause of her headaches wasn't a disease but an electronic device that someone had intentionally implanted. And it was highly likely that the person who did it was connected to her ex-husband. This device was the cause of your headaches, the doctor showed a sympathetic expression. If we perform removal surgery, your pain should improve. Margaret was finally beginning to understand the truth. 2 hours later, 2 police investigators and an electronics expert had gathered in a conference room at Dallas General Hospital. Margaret sat tensely in a chair with James holding her hand beside her. Mrs. Wilson, first we'd like to ask you to tell us in detail about the dental work 3 years ago, Detective Davis asked in a gentle tone. Margaret answered in a trembling voice. My wisdom tooth was hurting, and my ex-husband introduced me to his friend who was a dentist. Michael Harris. Do you remember the situation at that time? I was given anesthesia and lost consciousness. When I woke up, the surgery was over, and Dr. Harris explained that it had been a somewhat complicated extraction, Margaret said, tracing her memory. Robert was also waiting near the operating room. Expert Dr. Johnson spoke up. After detailed analysis of the MRI images, we've determined that this device is a high-performance GPS tracking device. It has the capability to transmit location information in real time. Margaret was appalled. You mean my whereabouts have been monitored for 3 years? Exactly. Furthermore, this device may also be equipped with audio recording capabilities. James said angrily, this is unbelievable. This is a complete invasion of privacy. Detective Davis continued. Mrs. Wilson, when did the divorce proceedings with your ex-husband begin? From March 2022, Margaret suddenly understood. 1 month before the dental work. What was the nature of the proceedings? We fought over property division and custody of my son. Robert claimed I was having an affair, but it was completely baseless, Margaret said resentfully. He didn't want to give up his company stock, so he was trying to make me the villain. Just then, another investigator entered the room. Detective, we have an important discovery. What did you find? We analyzed the computers seized from Robert Davis's home and office. Massive amounts of location information logs from the past 3 years were stored there. Margaret gasped. You mean all my activities were being recorded? Exactly. Furthermore, we found audio files. They contain conversations between you and your child, as well as your current partner. James's face went pale. Our private conversations were being wiretapped too. The investigator nodded. After examining the data in detail, we also found emails exchanged between Robert Davis and Dr. Harris. They contain specific consultations about installing this surveillance system. Detective Davis opened a file and read aloud. I want to collect evidence of Margaret's inappropriate behavior to gain an advantage in the divorce proceedings. I want to use a GPS device to track where she goes and use recording functions to capture disadvantageous statements. Margaret trembled with anger. He couldn't trust me. And to think he was even eavesdropping on conversations in front of our son. What's even more serious is that this surveillance continued for 3 years, the doctor explained. The device operates on a small battery and is designed to recharge using body heat. In other words, it was designed to operate semi-permanently. James stood up. This is a complete crime. Not only Margaret's privacy was violated, but mine and Ryan's too. The investigator continued. Interestingly, analysis of 3 years of data proves that Mrs. Wilson engaged in absolutely no inappropriate behavior. Robert Davis's suspicions were completely groundless. Margaret let out an ironic laugh. So he spent 3 years collecting data that proved my innocence. Exactly. Furthermore, this illegal surveillance activity makes him liable for serious legal consequences. He'll face charges for illegal medical practice, privacy invasion, stalking, and even violation of a child's privacy. Detective Davis spoke with a serious expression. Robert Davis and Dr. Harris were arrested this morning. Both have admitted to the charges. Margaret felt a complex mix of relief and anger. Why did Robert go so far? According to our investigation, his company was in financial trouble at the time. He was extremely fearful of having to give up company stock in the property division from the divorce, the investigator explained. He thought that if he could prove his wife's infidelity, he wouldn't have to pay alimony and could gain custody. As a result, he ended up losing everything, James pointed out calmly. Exactly. Due to this crime, his company's credibility has collapsed, and he's being sued by his business partners. Furthermore, his visitation rights with your son will likely be revoked. Margaret had mixed feelings. While their married life had certainly not been happy, she never imagined Robert would descend into such madness. When can the device removal surgery be performed? James asked the doctor. Dr. Patel answered. We'll perform surgery first thing tomorrow morning. Local anesthesia will be sufficient, so it will be day surgery. Once the device is removed, your headaches should be completely resolved. Margaret felt hope for the first time. The cause of the headaches she'd suffered from for so long was finally known, and it could be removed. Mrs. Wilson, if you need psychological support regarding this incident, we can refer you to a counselor, Detective Davis thoughtfully suggested. Thank you. I'll think about it, Margaret looked at James. But I have a wonderful family. They'll support me. That night, when they returned to the apartment, Margaret told Ryan the entire truth. Her son was shocked at first but then expressed anger. Dad is the worst. I never want to see him again, Ryan said clearly. I can't believe our conversations were being wiretapped too. Margaret hugged her son. But this will all be over now. After I have surgery tomorrow, the headaches will go away, and we'll truly be free. James joined them, and the three embraced. The long nightmare was finally about to end. 3 months later, on a spring afternoon, Margaret was drinking coffee in the warm sunlight on the terrace of James's restaurant. The device removal surgery had been successful, and the headaches that had tormented her so much had completely disappeared. Like fog lifting, her heart had also become light. Mom, I got a 95 on today's math test, Ryan reported happily. That's wonderful, Margaret ruffled her son's hair. Ryan seemed actually brighter than before since the incident. Perhaps he had overcome his disappointment in his father and understood what true family meant. James stuck his head out from the kitchen. Did you see today's local newspaper? Margaret shook her head. James brought the newspaper and opened to the business section. There was a headline reading, "Former IT company executive receives prison sentence." According to the article, Robert Davis had received a 3-year prison sentence for illegal medical practice and privacy invasion. His accomplice Dr. Harris had also had his medical license revoked and received a 2-year prison sentence. What happened to Robert's company? Margaret asked. It completely went bankrupt, James answered. The lawsuits from business partners are continuing, and all the customers left. Everything he built collapsed. Margaret had complex feelings. While she certainly felt anger toward her ex-husband, she also felt pity. Robert had tried to protect his assets and ended up losing everything. I got a letter from Dad, Ryan said quietly. But I threw it away without reading it. Margaret placed her hand on her son's shoulder. Was that the right thing to do? Yes. My real father is James now. Ryan looked at James and smiled. Tears welled up in James's eyes. Thank you, Ryan. I think of you as my son too. Looking at the two men, Margaret thought about the meaning of true family. More than blood relations or legal relationships, caring for each other and trusting each other was most important of all. After the incident, Margaret had been receiving psychological counseling. The fact that she had been monitored for 3 years initially deeply hurt her. However, through discussions with the counselor, she came to understand that she bore no responsibility whatsoever, and that true love meant trusting one's partner. How about going to the lake cottage this weekend? James suggested. We could do that fishing you both like. That sounds lovely, Margaret smiled. Since the headache stopped, everything feels enjoyable. Indeed, since the device was removed, Margaret's life had improved dramatically. Her concentration at work had returned, and colleagues were saying she seemed so much more vibrant lately. That night, while Ryan was doing homework in the apartment, Margaret and James talked quietly. For those 3 years, Robert was listening to all my conversations, Margaret said thoughtfully. But he never found the inappropriate behavior he was looking for. That's the best evidence of all, James said gently. You were completely faithful. His suspicions were totally groundless. Margaret gazed out the window. But why couldn't he trust me? That was his own problem. True love is based on trust, not suspicion or control. Margaret nodded deeply at those words. In her married life with Robert, she had been constantly monitored and suspected. However, her relationship with James was completely different. He trusted her, gave her freedom, and loved her just as she was. A few weeks later, Margaret received a call from her lawyer. Robert's assets were being auctioned off, and she would receive additional compensation money in addition to her previous alimony. Now I won't have to worry about Ryan's college expenses, Margaret reported to James. Money is important, but what's most important is that you're free now, James said. No one will ever monitor you again. Margaret smiled. Indeed, she had gained something more precious than money. It was true family bonds and love based on trust. After dinner, the three sat on the sofa watching television. Ryan leaned against Margaret while James held her hand. These casual moments were the happiest times for Margaret. Outside, the spring wind was blowing gently. The long winter was over, and a new season had begun. Margaret felt truly grateful. From the day they discovered the cause of her headaches, her life had become truly free.